Hey everybody, this is Greg Johnson here at Verimax Fitness in Sacramento, California. And I'm actually going to use this opportunity to create a little bit of a presentation about my thoughts on strength training and how I'm a big fan of a lot of the basics. But more importantly, I actually want to talk a little bit more about how to strength train when you don't necessarily have the aspects of a gym available to you. Or maybe just your body weight. I think a lot of people kind of misunderstand the aspect of strength training as it pertains to building strength and when it comes to home programs and things like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share my screen here. I created a little bit of a impromptu, basically presentation, as it were. And I've kind of done similar talks on a national level regarding how to bring back foundational strength training into your program, whether it's for strength training, athletic performance, fat loss. So what I want to do is I just want to kind of go through a couple of basic things, and then I want to end with as a full screen again and with some demos. So most importantly, I do want to talk about this dichotomy of fitness. I think a lot of people get stuck in this trap between what they're supposed to do as far as fitness. If they're trying to build muscle, if they're trying to lose weight, and they find that they either have to do one thing or the other. So when it comes to building strength training, I think a lot of people, when they get into more of a cardio aspect, they're missing the aspects of actual legitimate strength. So more often than not, there's obviously the cardio and strength aspect, but when you really look at it, there's a lot of things being thrown at you at this point when it comes to fitness. It's not just strength and cardio anymore. There's a lot of mobility, corrective, in movement-based training, power. And there was this big thing a while ago, train like an athlete, but apparently train like an athlete pretty much meant that you had to go all out as hard as you can every day. And I don't think that's the way to go for most people. So what I want to do is I want to kind of bring back about the role of what I should be doing as a trainer, or what all people should be doing as a trainer. I think rule number one is do no harm. If you're injuring people, or if I'm injuring people, obviously that's not the best for their program. But as far as training in general, this isn't just the role of a trainer. This is the purpose of basically training in general. Like, your goal is to not hurt yourself. In fact, the goal is to limit risk of injury. So the fact that injuries are increasing in the fitness industry is not a great thing. So rule number one is basically don't get hurt. If you're doing an exercise program that either someone was given, or that you found online, or that you're basically just trying to make up stuff at home, if you feel uncomfortable or if you don't feel safe doing it, I don't think that's the exercise program for you at the time. And then secondly is education. I think this is a huge miscomponent. Like I said, there is a lot of things out there as far as YouTube or social media, and just a lot of people doing a lot of things. And keep in mind, a lot of that is just to create likes and clicks and shares and create this response. It doesn't necessarily mean the highest rated video on social media or YouTube is the video that you should be doing for your workout. So you need to look at what your goals are and set your expectations of what's available. And again, if you shouldn't be doing a high intensity, high performance program, then that's not for you. I do want to take the opportunity of really talking about the actual principles of training. And these are some things that most trainers learned in their textbooks a long time ago, but for some reason disappeared. It looks like I have another small random one in there. I guess I have to fix that. But number one is the principle of individuality. And basically what that means is everybody is different, which means you shouldn't be doing the same program for everybody. You shouldn't be doing the same weights for everybody. What works for one does not, in fact, usually won't work for all. On the other side of it is principle of specificity, like really specifically pinpointing what you need for your program. I am not going to give one of my golfers the same program as I'm going to give someone who's morbidly obese and really trying to lose weight, nor would I give that same overweight person a high intensity program that I might give for a offensive lineman in football. You really need to train to what you're trying to do, and more importantly, kind of meet people where they're at. So again, if you're new to fitness, I don't expect you to be doing high intense complex lifts. I would work on the basics. And now the next couple, it really kind of comes down to strength training. And this is where I want to talk about mostly today, is how to strength train at home, maybe with minimal weight, is the principle of overload and progression. This is big, right? So in order to build muscle, or in order to build strength, you actually need to challenge your body to grow. So when I give a consultation and I talk to people about if they've done strength training before, and they say, oh yeah, I've done strength training. I say, okay, well, for example, have you done chest press? And they may say yes. I say, well, how much weight are you doing? And they say, okay, well, I use 10-pound dumbbells in each hand. And I may ask, how long have you been doing that? And if the answer is any more than a few months, that means they've not progressed or they've not overloaded themselves. So the problem is, in order to overload, you actually need to challenge your body. In order to progress, you need to challenge your body. So if you can do 10-pound weights easily, then you're probably not getting any effect out of them, whether it be cardiovascular strength or even potentially calorie burn. So when we talk about overloading and progressing things, you want to challenge people to where those last couple of reps are very hard. They're very difficult, right? So when we talk about sets and reps, which we'll talk about here in a second, if I usually ask people to do 15 reps, if they have a weight in their hand that they can do 15 and still go for another 4 or 5, 6 reps, that means that weight's not comparable to what they're trying to accomplish. Whereas if I want them to do 12 reps for a purpose of hypertrophy or size, and I give them a weight that they can barely do 6 times, then that's not meeting the demand for that hypertrophy either. So overload and progression, I think, are where a lot of people really kind of lose ground or don't make ground in their programs, because they find themselves doing the same thing with the same weights over and over and over and over and over again. So for example, you always hear about the fact that running isn't good for losing weight. Now there's a falseness and a truthiness to that. If I've never run, or for example, I stopped running for a year or so because I was doing other stuff, whether it's opening a business or focusing on strength. When I started running again, it actually did help me lose weight because I wasn't very good at it. I was inefficient. But what happened was, as I got better at running, it no longer challenged me like it did when I originally ran. So now I feel comfortable going outside and running 3 miles right now, and it doesn't affect me the same way as it did when I first started running. So in that case, running no longer is good for me to lose weight, but it did help me jumpstart it. But what happens is when people get good at running, it doesn't work as well. So the same thing with strength training is, if I'm doing a weight time in, time out, every time I go to the gym and I'm not really progressing, I'm not really building on that. And the last two principles of diminishing returns and principle of reversibility. Principle of diminishing returns is basically overuse, overtraining. If you're strength training every day, hitting muscle groups too often, you're actually not going to get the benefit of the strength training. You don't necessarily build muscle in the gym, you build muscle recovering from the gym. So it's really a matter of giving your body adequate rest time, so you're not just beating it up over and over and over again. And again, if you do find yourself, even if you're struggling on those last couple reps, using the same weight over and over and over and over again, you could be either overtraining muscles or potentially not necessarily training muscles right. And the last one, reversibility, that's obviously if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you stop strength training, you're going to lose muscle and you're going to potentially lose strength. If you stop doing flexibility, you're going to lose flexibility. If you stop stretching, you're going to lose flexibility. It really comes down to, again, if you don't use it, you lose it. That's with everything, basically across training and life, to be honest with you. So as far as specificity, I want to go back to that for a second. And I think a lot of people wonder where the whole sets, reps, and things come from like that. If you're trying to work on, let's say, muscle endurance, if you're a cardio athlete, you usually want to stay above that 15 rep range. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor here, but I'll kind of circle that. But that 15 to 20 range, that's muscle endurance. In other words, there's going to be an aerobic and an anaerobic capacity to that. Whereas if you're trying to work on size, muscle size, and that's where the old school typical sets of 10 to 12 come in, is that's that hypertrophy phase. All right. So as you're getting into this like hypertrophy phase, if you're trying to get muscle size and you're not doing that 10 to 12 reps, you may not necessarily be focusing on the same thing. But on the other side of it, if you're just picking up random weights and doing 12 of them, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get hypertrophy. It needs to be challenging 10 to 12 reps. And on the other side of it, and I'll kind of talk about this more, is there's a time under tension involved to that. It's not just jump down to the ground, do 12 push-ups as fast as you can. It's a controlled eccentric, concentric, and pause phase throughout, and we'll talk about that. Now, on the other side of it, as we get to more strength and power, power is explosive movement, and it's powerful movement. So in other words, if you're doing more than 5 reps, it may not necessarily still be in a power range. In other words, if I were to jump as high and as far as I can for one explosive jump, I wouldn't expect to replicate that 10 to 12 times and still be able to get as high and as far as I did on my first couple jumps. So it's explosive power. And then on the other side of it, if you look at just general like maximal strength, like trying to get as strong as you can, which again doesn't necessarily mean size. It doesn't mean being able to go further. It doesn't mean being able to lift heavy weights several times over 10, 20, 30, or as many reps as you can in a minute. Strength is that brute, hard 3 to 6 reps, struggling to get that 6th rep, and really asking your body to demand more strength aspect, tensile strength in the bones, muscle growth, things like that. So when we talk about what we're going to do at home, when it gets to the point at home and you don't have a lot of weights with you, it is really hard to get to that max strength, all right? But that doesn't mean you can't work on things like hypertrophy and general strength as well. So the big takeaway here is, especially when it comes down to individualizing a program and specificity of a program, there is no perfect program. I can't basically just hand someone a book and say, this is it. This is what you need to do for the next 16 weeks, because it really depends on how you adapt to what your body's doing. And not to mention, it also depends what you have available. I would love to be able to say, yes, this is the perfect program, but you need this, 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 and this. But if you're at home working out, you may not have that stuff available to you. So basically, in essence, what you need to do is you need to find the weights and the resistance and the time and retention that works for you, and then allow it to challenge yourself to adapt and to reassess. And if you can only do this many, let's say you can only do 10 slow push-ups, that's also an assessment. Okay, can I do better? Can I slow it down? Can I get to 12 as it pertains to a slow push-up? And we'll talk about this a little bit more as we go as far as the home program, but I am always looking for, am I progressing in my program or am I not? Am I doing the same thing as I was a month ago or 2 months ago? And what do I need to do to change it up in order to do that? So in the gym, we have a lot of different assessments, but at home, you may not have that same availability of assessments. So you're basically looking at your rep ranges as your assessment, okay? So now obviously this is a little bit more on the program design aspect of things, and obviously a little bit more advanced for the purpose of the conversation, but it is good to know that like there's cycles, there's program design. And again, I could give you a 16-week program, but we're not athletes. We may not have the same workout regimen, the same time. Some of us have jobs and kids and things like that. So a lot of times what we do is we try to work through these microcycles, these smaller phases of let's work in this rep range for about anywhere from a week to 3 weeks, and then we'll change it up. But obviously, if you look at something more advanced, like a 4-year plan, that's basically like an Olympic athlete. They're working over the span of 4 years, so that when they hit that mark, when they're in the Olympics, they are at that peak optimal physical condition in order to basically try to break records. Whereas general public, myself included, I'm not looking at that. I'm looking more at these smaller phases because I still want to just continue to build and grow on myself and what we're working on. And again, a little bit more detail than we need, but basically there are different ways to do this. Most of our clients tend to go on what's called an undulating periodization. And that basically means we don't necessarily have a specific time plan. We're not planning for specific events in the summer or a big competition or a training for the playoffs or a championship of some sort. So we're basically continuing kind of fine tuning. We'll go in chunks at a time. Like we'll spend a couple weeks at sets of 10 and a couple weeks at sets of 15, and then a couple weeks at sets of heavy sets of 6, and then we'll move back to those stronger sets of 12. So we're always adjusting a little bit. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on who you are and what your specific goals are, but those are just the way I look at things as it pertains to strength training. So now I want to talk about the stuff that you can basically do not only in the gym, but also at home. Is the basics. And if you've ever trained with me, I'm very foundational when it comes to strength training. Is I want people to get very, very good at the basics, so that way we can lift heavier weights, get stronger at them, do something often enough to where you can get better at it. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to change your workout every single workout just to get muscle confusion. The muscle confusion comes from changing the sets, reps, and weights. So if you look at this list here, these are the basic movements. This is what everybody should have the ability to do. Not everybody should have the ability to do. Everybody knows what a plank is, unless if you train with me, you better know what a plank is, a picture perfect plank. But then there's also a squat, a hip hinge, lunge, horizontal push and pull, vertical push and pull. So basically these motions, push and pull, and then rotate. Now, if you were to add like a walking position to that, like reciprocal motion, that's pretty much every movement the body can do. So everything that you do, whether it's in the gym or in the backyard or playing sport, is either one of those movements or a combination of those movements. And we'll talk about that. If we were to kind of advance this, let's make it a little bit more challenging, is adding the variations. If I can do a squat, I can do a double-legged squat or a single-legged squat. I can do a single arm push or a double arm push. So obviously there's different ways to that. So perfect example. Let's say I want to do a push. Now obviously everybody knows about bench press and dumbbell press and push-ups. So those are all a push. But there's also the single-sided stuff. There's changing your body position. There's alternating positions. So there's a ton of different ways to make these more challenging, but you're still focusing on that horizontal push, all right? And again, push-ups, there's a ton of variations of push-ups. So programming, when it comes down to strengths, is you need to kind of determine what your goal is and then determine your sets and reps off what your goal is. So again, if you're trying to get bigger, I am looking for a challenging set of 10 to 12 reps. If you're trying to get stronger, all right, you need to potentially lift heavier weight, but you may only be able to get 4 or 6 or 8 reps in. And we don't always get to that right away with a lot of people, because obviously there's a lot of form involved in your body's ability to load or carry heavy weight. All right, if you want to get stronger, I'm not just going to throw you under a straight bar and say, okay, I want you to do 6 reps of 200 pounds. Is you got to learn that first and build up to where your body can get that strength. And then that's where you kind of program accordingly. So this is actually, I just decided to throw this in there as far as like some full body workouts. Is if we're working out at home, we don't have the gym available, I may do something like a squat one day, whereas the next day I'm going to do something like a single-legged squat. If I do a hip hinge, let's say I do a deadlift on one day, on the opposing day I'm going to do something single-legged for the glutes. That could be a single-leg deadlift, or that could be a single-leg hip thrust. Same thing. So there's ways to change that up. Whereas if I were to do single-sided everything, that would take forever in the gym or at home. So those are just a couple examples of workouts. So now I want to talk about like how to basically make things a little bit more difficult at home. And now we all know the sets, reps, and weights, okay? So if I want to make things more difficult, I can either add more sets, add more reps, or add more weight. So in other words, if I'm doing 3 sets of 10 of 20 pounds, and that's getting easy, I could add an extra set. I could do 4 sets. That's going to make it harder. I could do 15 reps of each one, 3 sets of 15. That can make it harder. Or if I'm still trying to stay in that set of 10 to 12, instead of adding sets or reps, I want to add weight. And we'll talk here about other options of adding resistance, all right? And then on the other ways to make things more difficult, again, if you're stuck at home and you don't have a lot of weights, or you're just in an area where you don't have a lot of weights, I know some hotel gyms only go up to like 10 or 15 pounds, or they just have just basic benches and dumbbells. changing to single-sided exercises. So if you only have a 5-pound weight or a 10-pound weight and you could do squats with that all day, work on a lunge or a single leg squat or a single leg sit to stand, and things like that, and slow it down. Trust me, you can make that 10 pounds feel really hard. Time under tension is the big one. Slow it down, slow it down, slow it down. And this is where people mistakenly forget about this as far as the strength aspect. If I'm doing a push-up, let's say, for example, I say, okay, get down on the ground, do 12 push-ups. And you plop down on the ground, you basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And 12 push-ups may be easy for some people, all right? But the sets and rep ranges when it comes to hypertrophy, a set of 10 to 12, actually originally came from a time under tension aspect. In other words, you should have about 45 seconds of time under tension. Now, that's a lot differently than 12 push-ups in 12 seconds, okay? And I'm going to talk about this in a little bit, right? And then a couple other things is to just increase resistance or increase difficulty is your body position. Right? Again, where you put your feet on a push-up is going to make it easier or harder. So if my hands are on a countertop and my feet are on the ground, and I'm still doing a horizontal push, that's going to be much easier. If I were to put my feet up with on, let's say, a couch and my hands on the ground, right, that's going to be a little bit harder. But there's also different body positions as far as where the resistance is. There's also what's called variable resistance, using bands, cords, or things that you're not used to lifting. It's one thing to lift a barbell, which is a very strict position, but what if you were to grab something like a ball that was filled with water, or a sandbag, or, I mean, I know this sounds funny, but I've seen a lot of people online using their kids or animals as weights, and if they're moving, that's a variable resistance. And then also what's called eccentric resistance. Now, I kind of like this one. Take your hands and put them against each other. And brace your abdominals, and I want you to start pressing your hands against each other. And as you're pressing your hands against each other, you're going to start feeling certain things happen, okay? So you're not using any weight, but I want you to keep pressing, keep pressing, keep pressing. You're not using any weight, but you should start to feel the muscles in your chest turn on, maybe a little bit in your core, in your arms. And now that's obviously called an isometric movement, where nothing's moving. But I can also actually keep pressing and move my arms in different directions, which means it's actually no longer an isometric movement. We're actually moving. We're getting eccentric and concentric movement in the muscles and the triceps and the biceps, right? That's basically creating resistance from the inside, right? When you create a plank, when you tighten your abdominals, right, you're creating a resistance from the inside. And now we're also going to talk about being able to use your body to create resistance on basically things like the ground. Or if I were to put my hands up against a doorway and press against both sides of the doorway, right? Again, I'm using my internal forces in my body to create resistance outer, okay? So that's going to be a kind of a fun one, and that's actually really important as it pertains to working out at home, right? So I want you to look at this real quick, and then I'm actually going to pop up to a full screen so you can see me. But for the example of working out, and again, this is talking about people who want to get stronger or maybe want to kind of maintain their muscle and size, is I want to show you a couple different options to work on some of these basic exercises, okay? So case in point, I actually posted a dumbbell workout earlier in the week, and it was a fairly high tempo because the purpose of it was strength and cardio. So I had sets of 15. We kept it a pretty good pace. My heart rate was up quite a bit. But I want to bring back some of the things that we used in that workout, and I want to slow it down for the purpose of strength and hypertrophy. All right, so squats, push-ups, split squats, rows, and single leg deadlifts. And I'll kind of explain how we're going to do this. Okay, so I'm going to pop out of this screen. What's my next screen? Oh, thank you. All right, so I'm going to pop out of this, and I'm going to put myself in a position where you guys can see me a little bit more, because I have my dumbbells here. And now, normally, keep in mind, I would normally have done a full warm-up. I warmed up a little bit before I started this talk, but now I've been sitting for about a half hour. But just to give you an idea, all right, and I'm not worried about the weights. This is really just for demo. But in the video that I did on dumbbells, it was basically a fairly higher pace, okay? Now, and you can try this with me if you want, all right? You can grab dumbbells if you want or just kind of work with your body. But I want to show you different ways to create tension, because these are only 15-pound weights, but I'm going to make this much, much harder. So if I were to have a natural squat position, and we don't need to go over the details of the entire squat, it's just a demo, but feet slightly wider than shoulder width apart, right? Before I even pick up the weights, all right? I want to take my feet, and if there was a seam in the ground underneath me, if I try to pull my feet against the ground, like I'm trying to rip the ground apart, you'll immediately start to feel all the muscles in your body turn on, okay? So that's a great way to kind of start working on added resistance, all right? Now, if I have two weights, I can actually hold them together, and I'm gonna squeeze the dumbbells together, and I'm gonna rip the floor apart, and I'm gonna tighten my abs, and I'm gonna slowly go down, okay? So I want you to give this a try. Feet slightly wider than hip width apart, dumbbells together, shoulders down, abs tight. Now, as you're trying to rip the ground apart, all right, the eccentric movement is gonna take 3 seconds. Rip the ground apart, 3, 2, 1, hold, and then up. 3, 2, 1, pause, down. 3, 2, 1, pause. 3, 2, 1, back down. 3, 2, 1, pause, back up. And what you're going to start feeling, all right, just try to keep going at that tempo. I'm going to try not to speed up as I'm talking, but as I'm ripping the ground apart, as I'm holding the weights together, I'm keeping my shoulders down, I'm starting to feel a lot more muscles kick on. And you'll start to feel that. And all of a sudden, these 15-pound weights will start to get your legs trembling. Does that make sense? Okay. So now, as far as the push-up, again, if I'm doing a push-up, I say, okay, get down on the ground, do push-ups, and you just start pounding out push-ups. All right, I want to make this more advanced. So here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to open up your hands as wide as you can. Your feet are going to be slightly wider than hip width apart. All right. Now, I'm actually going to, again, I'm going to try to get my toes to pull against the carpet. So I'm getting my glutes turned on. And as I control down, I'm going to say 3, 2, 1, pause. And when I push back up, I'm literally trying to take the ground and pull it together. Like I was trying, like if I was on a carpet, I should actually bring the carpet together. So obviously this isn't going to move. Hardwood floor is good. So hands are wider than hip, shoulder width. Down slow, 2, 1. And then I'm going to go up slow while trying to pull the ground together. And you will feel an amazing difference on how much that activates your arms and your pecs. All right, so now the same thing. So we got squats, we got push-ups. And I want you to try this. It's a simple exercise routine. All right, split squats or lunges, same thing. I'm going to have these here. All right, if I was in a lunge position, make sure you can see my whole body. All right, about that 90 degrees. All my weight's on my front heel. All right, same thing. My weight's going to be in my front foot. I'm going to pull down. 3, 2, 1, pause. And then I'm going to feel like I'm pulling the carpet together underneath my feet. 3, 2, 1, up. 3, 2, 1, pause. 3, 2, 1. All right. So just doing those few reps, you should feel the difference in your legs, in your core, in your arms. And then same thing if I were to do rows, shoulders back. All right. 3, 2, 1. And if I don't have heavy weights, I'm squeezing, I'm tightening muscles. I'm squeezing. Like I always tell my clients, if I were to give you an orange to hold under your arm, I'm squeezing it like I'm making orange juice. So I'm actively turning on those muscles. All right, so the same thing, shoulders back. 3, 2, 1, squeezing, and then back down. 3, slow, 1, take a break, shoulders back. All right, does that make sense? And then the last thing is a single leg deadlift, or you, again, that was just on the screen. Slow it down, make it a balanced exercise. Level hips, 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm gripping the ground with my toes. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Pause. 3, 2, 1. All right. So, guys, I want you to practice this at home. And by all means, go back to the dumbbell workout that I did on YouTube and practice those, but instead of doing the tempo that I'm doing in the workout, slow them down, all right? So external forces, create resistance with your own body, slow the movements down, and that is great for building strength at home. All right, hope you guys enjoyed this. If you guys have any questions, feel free to connect with me. See if I can share a screen real quick again. If you have any questions whatsoever, gjohnson@veramaxfitness.com, or you can also hit me up at Facebook and Instagram. Again, thank you guys very much. Hopefully this was informative. Let me know what you think. Slow down those movements for strength, and we'll talk to you guys very soon. Thank you.